We have exciting news out of Seattle with the opening of the Light Link rail extension, which goes south of Seattle to Federal Way. And this is just one of a few major transit expansions that are happening in the city.
Yeah, so today we're going to cover that recent grand opening that happened just this month in December. We're going to talk about the current testing on the two lines Cross Lake connection, which is the one going over the floating bridge connecting Bellevue into Seattle. And then we're also going to talk about a BRT network, which is going to work closely in conjunction with the light rail. We talked about this stuff a little bit about a year ago, and Seattle seemingly gets ignored online with transit stuff quite often, and the Seattle folks have let us know in the comments quite a few times, so we're going to go a little bit more in depth this time. Yes, quite a few times. You're right. And to be fair, we have forgotten about them quite a few times. So today we're going to kind of dive into all of these different things and start off with the Federal Way extension. So this is an extension to the one line in Seattle, which is this massive north-south light rail line. This will be a 7.8-mile extension, which adds 3 stops to the existing line, which, again, I said it's massive. It is literally 41 miles long.
That is insane. That is 41 miles long.
Yes.
But you also got to think about the geography of Seattle. I mean, it's on that, long, I was going to say peninsula, but I guess isthmus is kind of the right term.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so it just kind of follows this whole long urban corridor of Seattle. But yeah, 41 miles is crazy.
Yes. If you were to travel it from end to end right now, starting in the north in Linwood and going all the way to Federal Way, the schedule says it would take you roughly 90 minutes. And again, the kind of interesting thing about this route is that in parts of it, it's elevated above a highway. In parts of it, it is fully tunneled underground, kind of through the downtown part of Seattle. There's a stretch of it that runs in the median of a fairly busy road before approaching the airport, and then we're kind of in this new southern extension, mostly back to kind of elevated running along the side of a highway, essentially. I just said extensually.
I heard that.
Extension. And
from Eagle Lake, this now heads south along I-5 through mostly single-family neighborhoods before reaching the Kent-Des Moines station. There's a large park and ride facility here, and what we're kind of seeing is that it seems like there's a lot of park and ride facilities on this line, which does make sense if you're trying to serve the airport or, get people back into sort of downtown Seattle. From here, it also accesses Highline College, which has about 15,000 students.
Yeah, and I do think that this station being here makes a lot of sense. 15,000 students is quite a few. Then you also need to figure it, in all the people who are working at the college. So I think that this is a good stop placement. They specifically have the right-of-way kind of jut in off of the highway right-of-way for a bit here, just to make that access to the university or to the college a lot better, a lot shorter of a walk, essentially, to make it easier there. Potentially some room for more development here too, but right now it's mostly going to be that park and ride facility, like you mentioned, as well as connection to buses. From Kent-Des Moines Station, the route essentially jogs back towards I-5, heading further south until reaching the next station at Star Lake. This station has yet another park and ride facility with a garage and everything. But otherwise, there's not a ton right in the station area, and there's not a ton of room to build anymore. Fortunately, though, on the same side of the highway as the station, there are some older apartment complexes that are definitely within the walkshed of the station. It's not the densest area ever with the most amount of people living right there, but it is a fairly good use of the station being in that particular zone. So happy to see that they included a station here, especially considering there are only a handful of stops along this new 7.8-mile extension.
Yeah, exactly. And then from here, it's going to continue down through some more sort of lower density single family neighborhoods until it arrives at Federal Way. And Federal Way is sort of what you would imagine as that very American shopping center area. Huge surface parking lots, a lot of big box stores, shopping, dining, all that kind of stuff around. And while there's not a ton of TOD happening right now at this area, I think the potential for this being a large TOD stop is definitely there. And I think it also should be noted, when we talk about, there's not a lot of density along this line. The ultimate goal is for this line to continue down to Tacoma. And so now this is going to be a pretty heavily used corridor between Tacoma and Seattle once that way future line is finished. So I definitely think there's going to be a lot more development happening here over the next decade or so.
Yeah, for sure. And there was an interesting article in the Urbanist that I was reading when kind of putting together some of the information for this, and they were saying that, they were not seeing the same levels of transit-oriented development happening in this Federal Way extension as they had seen with the construction of, for example, the light rail in Bellevue. But like you're saying, this isn't necessarily right now. It doesn't necessarily have the full vision all the way to Tacoma, although you would hope to see some of that development begin to be spurred as we are now like starting to approach the time period where that is kind of the next extension for this line. You want to see some of that development happening ahead of the light rail construction so that when the light rail opens, the apartments can be already there ready, with folks living there who are ready for the light rail to kind of come into their neighborhood. So worth the read if you're interested. We'll make sure there's a link for you to check it out down below. And then the other thing we've kind of talked about with this a few times is this whole section is running along I-5. In the north of the one line, it also runs along I-5. And you get some pros and cons with this. And this will be a theme kind of throughout this episode, talking about some of the different transit options in Seattle. But, you get the pros are you've got the right of way already there. You're building along these highways, the state or the city or whatever. I mean, in this case, it's very likely the state has the right of ways already. The state and the city are very likely working together, friendly in the state of Washington, Seattle. You've got transit-friendly politicians in the mix, which helps things out. And the right-of-way is there. You don't need to, worry about utility relocations as much. You don't need to worry about, buying the right-of-way. But it definitely comes with some drawbacks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about how highways were constructed, and we've talked about this a lot in the past, you've literally bulldozed neighborhoods to build highways. They're not the most like hospitable places for people to be. And when you think about these mass transit options, you really want them to be in, walkable neighborhoods and corridors that you see a lot of activity, a lot of surface street activity. And you're not really going to see that on the highways. A lot of the entrances, you have to either cross the highway or somehow get into the middle of the highway to be able to access these stations. Yeah, there's definitely some drawbacks for the pedestrian connectivity when it's running through this massive road.
Right. Yeah, and you're just like cutting your like walk shed in half, basically. You know what I mean? Like it's just it is like highways are just physically big. Like you'll spend 3 minutes crossing it if you're depending on the size of the area that you're in. So one last piece on this before we move on to the Cross Lake extension progress. The cost for this extension was $2.5 billion. Construction began in 2020, and it opened again just a couple weeks ago, this December in 2025. So not the worst timeline for construction.
Also, those numbers aren't, and maybe I'm just so used to huge dollar projects, but those numbers don't seem too bad. I mean, 7.8 miles at 2.5 billion versus other cities where we've seen, what was it, Chicago, 5 miles for $5 billion.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like the numbers are all that bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we'll keep an eye on this one, though. Again, this is not the end of extensions to the one line, although it is worth noting when this does extend all the way to Tacoma, the one will not run all the way from Tacoma all the way to Linwood, which would be a hilariously long route. There will be other extensions kind of having been done at that point, so there will be some rerouting of where the routes actually go. So we won't have a 60-mile, it won't be 60, but we won't have some 60-mile light rail running in Seattle. Maybe it will be, I don't know.
It's somebody's dream to spend 2 hours on a train between Seattle or between Linwood and Tacoma.
Yes, yeah. Of course.
The next major extension that we want to talk about is the Cross Lake extension. We did talk a little bit about this on a previous episode, but I don't think we really did it the right amount of justice. So we're going to try to do a little better here. But this is another 8-mile extension that will cross from Seattle over to Bellevue across Lake Washington. And this is also part of the Link Light Rail system. This is going to connect to the 2 line, which already exists and serves that sort of Bellevue corridor on the other side of Lake Washington. And it's also notable because it's going to be crossing, I believe, one of the largest, if not the largest, floating bridge in the world. The bridge is remarkable for being this engineering marvel of being a floating bridge. And I believe this is also the first time that a light rail system is crossing a floating bridge. So that was really big news and was very, very cool. They're currently doing testing on that now, so hopefully we see that opening very, very soon. But this line, when it connects from Seattle to the Bellevue area, as it's crossing the bridge, the light rail line is going to reach speeds up to 55 miles an hour. So it should be getting you across the lake pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely very exciting. And we've got a quick, like 30 or 40-second clip from the team that's actually doing the testing on the bridge. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Welcome aboard a live wire test train on the I-90 bridge.
Today we're taking you behind the scenes, from setup to removal of safety blocks to the training to our slow sweep speed across the bridge. Before
All right, let's do it at full speed.
safety sweeps and warm-up completed, it was time to hit track speed and see how our bridge is looking.
Behind me, folks are monitoring the interaction between the OCS and the pantograph on the screen, and when they see those arcs and flashes, that tells us what we need to go back out and adjust. Live wire testing is an iterative process. You do it over and over so that the system gets smoother and smoother and more ready to operate in revenue service, which is what we're continuing to work towards. Thanks, everybody.
So starting from the Bellevue side, the southernmost station over there is South Bellevue Station, which is essentially just another park and ride. Again, we should have saved how many times we said park and ride in this episode. It's probably quite a few at this point. So from the park and ride, the extension will run along I-90 over to Mercer Island. There will be one station on Mercer Island, and it will be in the center of the highway, like a median station, essentially. And the access to this one is actually fairly good for being in the center of a highway. What they've done is they've done 2 highway stitches. If you're not familiar with what a highway stitch is, we've done a couple episodes specifically about this in the past, but it's a wider crossing of the highway to make it a little bit more pleasurable to walk over. You've usually got trees and kind of park space. Some places will put buildings and whatnot on them. So from a fairly developed area that has quite a few apartments and some kind of, slightly more dense strip mall development, if you know what I'm talking about, I guess, on Mercer Island, you can kind of walk down to this station. You also have a park and ride there, of course, because it wouldn't be a new stop on this light rail system without a park and ride, before then kind of continuing to head further into Seattle.
Yeah, and then after it leaves the Mercer Island station, it crosses the floating bridge, which is very, very cool, before getting back into the main area of Seattle. Just past, I think it's 23rd Avenue, is where you have Judkins Park, which is going to be the new stop for this line. Judkins Park is the station's notable because you can only enter from either end of the station platform, and again, it's in the middle of a highway, so you are having to cross this highway bridge to be able to access the station. Also, the density of this area. There are some fairly dense neighborhoods nearby, but not really adjacent to the line. So I'd be really curious to see what the ridership and the access looks like there. Just based on satellite view, it does look like they've done a really good job integrating some of the trails, like bike trails and everything, going across the bridge and to the station. But again, very curious to see what that looks like when it's open. And then from Judkins Park, the line continues on into Seattle and then terminates at Union Station.
Yeah, and that's where it will essentially meet the existing one line. And instead of actually terminating, what's kind of cool about this section is it will actually continue further north, and it will go all the way to Linwood, and it will give some crazy good frequencies all the way through this section. So presently on the one line, the north-south line there, you've got at peak frequencies every 8 minutes. With the addition of the 2 line will now run from Bellevue. It'll run over the lake. It will run into Seattle, and then it will run north all the way to Linwood as well, also at every 8 minutes. So on that north section from Seattle all the way to the northern terminus of the line, you'll actually have 4-minute frequencies, which, I mean, you can't beat that. Basically, you just can't beat it.
Yeah, the 4-minute frequencies would be incredible if we could hit it. I mean, there's not really many places or any place in the U.S. that's really hitting that. I mean, even in New York, a major complaint is that the frequencies aren't high enough, which New Yorkers, you blow my mind that's your complaint. But yeah, it would be really impressive if they could do it. I know there's some chatter online about people being skeptical that they aren't going to hit it, mostly because there's not a lot of bypasses, and if there's any issues like maintenance or something breaks down, you may have a train that's stuck. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen very often. So
yeah,
hopefully
I think
they can definitely hit these.
Yeah, I think it's technically possible, But yeah, the concern starts to lie in like once you have one little thing go wrong, the amount of issues that build up, because there are several points where a single point of failure could be a major issue where you have to have trains routing, single track through several stations before you can, cross back over to another track. So definitely something to keep an eye on. They are starting these kind of double frequency tests in the next couple weeks in Seattle. So if you're on the one line in the northern section, you may see some trains that are just testing in the 4-minute intervals that won't be open to the public to ride, but you'll see that they're kind of starting to get ready and planning for this inevitable open, which is said to be, a direct quote, early 2026. So no set date, but early next year.
So if you are watching from the Link Light Rail system and you want to give us the inside scoop on a better date, let us know. Or we'd love to come up and also ride it in 2026. So.
Yes, that is we gotta make it. We were just talking the other day about some sort of West Coast trip, so it's in the conversations at the least. I think this is going to be really interesting when we start to talk about ridership.
Overall, ridership in Seattle seems like it's been on the rise. Light rail is moving upwards to 125,000 people per day, which is, pretty impressive. And then once the connection across the lake opens, that's just going to really increase that ridership for people getting between Seattle and Bellevue and everywhere else that they need to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's fully gonna change like the options for commuter habits across the whole city, going both directions and whatnot, and even beyond that, when you start to look even further into the future, we're not going to cover the additional light rail extensions right now that are kind of further out in time scale, but there are a few other projects that are currently under construction that I think are pretty exciting and probably don't get as much praise. And these are the BRT lines that are currently under construction. So there's 3 of them presently. You've got S1, S2, and S3, and they're scheduled to open in 2028 and 2029. And these are S1 and S2 are kind of the 2 main ones, and they essentially run in like center tolled highway lanes. What's the official name for those, Chris? What?
Express lanes.
Express lanes.
There's open road tolling, which is if you're, tolling all the lanes, or there's like express lanes. There's HOV, high occupancy vehicle lanes. It just depends on what you call it in that region.
Right. So these buses will be operating in those lanes. They'll be essentially getting to the areas where there would be stops, and instead of having it be a bit clunky where the buses have to like navigate on and off the highways for the stops, what they're doing is building these really cool looking access stations where the buses will essentially either go up or the road above will come down to make it so that riders will be able to board the bus, kind of in these highway medians most of the time, unfortunately, but the buses will not need to navigate on and off the highway. They will have really smooth approaches to each stop for pulling in and pulling out to continue their journey back along the highway, which is pretty slick, and we don't get to see that very often.
No, and I'm trying to think of other cities that have experienced that in the U.S., and the only one that comes to mind is Houston. There's a couple of spots where the buses exit the highway, they have their own stations, and then they can jump back on the express lanes. But I don't really see it very often in other cities. And again, I don't drive a lot in the Northeast, so maybe they do exist there.
The only other comparison I can think to make, and it is different, is we talked about like last spring the BRT that opened in Minneapolis that runs along the highway, but that one's not even in express lanes. That one's just kind of runs along the highway off to the side. But yeah, I think Houston is the best example, and like we've gotten to ride them on the show before in our Houston Using Only Public Transit episode. So if you're interested in seeing how they work out there, that's a good spot to check it out.
As far as frequency goes for these lines, we're looking at the bus lines being open about 17 hours a day. And then the frequency or headway is going to be about every 10 to 15 minutes. And this is true for all 3 of these BRT lines.
Yeah, I think that's impressive considering, these are not dense downtown areas. These are, we're rolling through the suburbs on the highway essentially. And I love to see that they're going to be able to keep these frequencies up as long as they are, and that they're running them for a long portion of the day. So I'm happy to see that. And with the infrastructure going in the way that it is, it seems like they're not half-assing it either. I mean, like, you're not building these ramps for the buses to have special stops throughout, unless you're intending on making that service as good as possible. So, when you have that infrastructure in place, it will be easy to, increase the duration throughout further in the day if you wanted to, increase the frequencies. It's just, they're really setting themselves up for potential growth in the future with this.
Well, we say that until you have a mayor like Whitmer in Houston.
Oh, God.
And the infrastructure's there and he just ripped it all out. So
now you're
the idea is that you can improve it over time. Yes.
yes, exactly.
It's really good utilization of the toll lanes. That's a really cool feature. And I know we already touched on it, but generally less traffic in the toll lanes generally. But it's very cool. And you're not adding, I mean, you've already added a lane for the tolling, but you're not adding an additional bus lane and just expanding the highway further. So it is cool to see that utilization.
Yeah, I'm imagining too that like they probably received less pushback because they were utilizing the paid toll lanes as well, and the vast majority of the time the paid toll lanes do stay traffic free as well. I mean, in places that I've experienced them. I don't have a lot of experience using. I've actually used them in Seattle once. It was not on. I think it was on I-5 though. It was in an HOV lane because we had enough people in the car, so I wasn't like paying for it. But we had hit the HOV limit, and it was nice. We were cruising through while everyone else was sitting in traffic. But yeah, I bet that they receive less pushback. I mean, you're not going to have people being like, "Oh, no to bus lanes," whatever, some ridiculous campaign that a bunch of NIMBYs throw together. I would imagine that this would be harder to fight.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
So that's the defining feature of Seattle. It's the highways that are kind of crisscrossing this region, and they are probably using these highway right-of-ways more than any other place that we've really seen. So as we said, there's definitely some pros and cons to it, but it does seem like a really viable way to at least get these transit projects moving.
Yeah, and I think like it's great to get the bones going, and then in the future, like as you win more and more people over, you can then start to have routes that maybe finger off a little further out of the highways. And they're already starting to do this with, it seems like there are quite a few good feeder routes of buses into the light rail system, even beyond the BRT ones we mentioned, more local buses. So I like to see the connectivity happening, and it's, even with these bus routes too, it's great to see the connectivity into the light rail. It's almost acting as kind of a big ring route around the greater Seattle area. So lots of exciting things, and today was the most time I had spent just like scrolling through the maps, looking at the plans, and there's still so much more to learn about it. So if you're from Seattle and there are specific little projects we should be looking into, additional extensions we should be looking into, definitely let us know. And I don't know when it would be, but we would like to get to Seattle in the future. So if you know of any advocacy groups there, you've got, certain things we should check out, definitely reach out to us either via social media or email account, anything like that. We would really appreciate the feedback from you guys.
If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to support us in any way that you can. The biggest and best way that you can do that is by liking and subscribing to the channel, sharing these videos with your friends, family, bus drivers, train drivers, whoever you think is going to enjoy them. We also have our merch store where you can buy t-shirts and hats and a couple other things, as well as utilizing our Buy Me a Coffee link or joining our Patreon, where we try to get episodes out early. We're trying to get better, be better about it.
Last week's was a little early.
Yeah.
But with all that being said, though, thank you all so much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your Transit Tangents Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm saving that dough. Public transit's where it's at. Watch me go.